Hey guys, welcome to Traditional Bow Hunting Wilderness Podcast. This is Jason Samkoviak. Today we're going to talk about a very controversial subject, which is FOC in arrows for traditional bow hunters. We're going to break it down, talk about the benefits, whether you need it or not, if it's okay to have it where you're at, what area. We're going to break this thing down in full detail for you. First off, what is FOC? FOC is the balance point on the arrow, how much forward of center weight. So when you find the center of your arrow in there, whatever, and then there's a balance point forward of that, but whatever weight you have more forward of center is what you're looking for. So if your balance point is right here, dead center in that arrow, you basically have what we would call zero. That would be zero forward of center because your balance point is in the center. As you move that balance point over closer to the front right here, you see that you get forward of center. That's what you're looking for. And there's some advantages to it. We're going to take a minute, get into it, cover it in full detail for you so we cover everything. If you like this shirt, this is from TradQuest Podcast. James Orr over there, him and Bob, they do an incredible job. It is by far the best traditional bow hunting podcast out there. And this coming from a guy who actually runs a traditional bow hunting podcast. You know, I love my podcast. A lot of people do, but I'm telling you, if you haven't found TradQuest yet, go search it. It's on iTunes, Stitcher. It's on everything. They have their own website, tradquest.com. It's all right there for you, but definitely go check that out. I love these guys. They do a phenomenal job. But it's kind of a shameless plug in there. Not asked for or anything, but like I said, I like them a lot. But now as far as the FOC stuff, how this works, that forward to center again, so you have 0 point on that shaft right here, that 0 point from 0 to 12% forward of that is going to be good. And that's considered standard. That's what we call normal FOC, is about 12%. I will also mention forward, I'm going to jump around a little bit in this one here for you. But in order to figure this out, if you want to jump right ahead and see where your arrow stands, go over to toughhead.com, educate, and then click on education. They have a calculator right there that'll let you figure out what your FOC is, and it shows you how to measure it. Very simple. You want the AMO1, you go right from the back of the head to the throat of the nock. It's very simple calculation on there, but you'll find out what your total arrow length is, and then you'll find out where the center of your arrow is, and then you'll go to your balance point and you do this math, and you just plug in your total arrow length, and you plug in your, I don't even remember, I haven't been there in a while, but it's right there. But Toughhead, not only do they have a great FOC calculator, they have a lot of great stuff on there. Dr. Ashby, Ed Ashby, is the one that has come up with a lot of this stuff, really broke it down, analyzed in scientific data, and tested this. And a lot of people believe in what his stuff is. A lot of people don't. It's completely up to you. But I'm telling you that if you're interested in it, you can find all of it, including all of Ashby's videos, reports, tuning stuff. All that stuff is right there at toughhead.com, education. Go check it out for sure. You'll find a lot of great information there, and it'll tell you how to figure out that calculation of where your arrow FOC is. Now, back to this. 0 to 12% is good. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, you don't need to have high FOC, extreme FOC, UFOC. No, it is not mandatory. Yes, you can kill animals without it. I will put that disclaimer in here right now. More animals have been killed with traditional bows with a normal FOC than anything else probably ever in history. If you go all the way back through all the animals killed with traditional bows, the majority of them would have probably been in that normal FOC range. Right? So it's okay. They work fine. There are some benefits as you go up this, which we will get into and explain. But understand that this is not mandatory to have. When you're looking at it, carbon arrows, if you shoot carbon, like I do, this is carbon, not wood. This is not wood, this is carbon. Just like one of these carbon shafts, same thing, it's just got a wood grain on it. But if you shoot carbon, getting high FOC, extreme FOC, ultra extreme FOC, not complicated to do. It gets harder as you go up the chart, but still not complicated. If you shoot an aluminum shaft, it is still easy to get those same kind of results, especially if you're going for high. Extreme is doable. Ultra extreme gets a little more complicated, but it is doable with aluminum. Where we run into issues is with wood shafts. Because the density and the weight of an actual wood shaft is very hard to get into this extreme and ultra extreme. It's hard to get into that kind of category. That's okay. Wood arrows have a tremendous amount of benefits, and they work just fine, and they've killed a lot of animals, and they've done a fantastic job, and you don't have to have this. So if you're shooting wood arrows and you're going, God, I can't get EFOC, I can't get Ultra EFOC, I can't get that kind of stuff, it's okay. You don't have to have it. Trust me, there's so many benefits to shooting wood arrows. I don't shoot them anymore. Shot them for about 10-year period, cedars and Doug firs and maples and all kinds of stuff, and they're fantastic. They require some more time to make, which I just don't seem to have anymore, and that's the only reason I don't. But there's nothing more beautiful than a wood arrow in flight. There's no doubt about it. So wood is so the benefits of wood are tremendous. And when it comes to this, they even themselves out. So like I said, if you're shooting wood arrows and you can't get that extreme or that ultra extreme, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to matter. You're still going to be able to kill animals. But if you shoot aluminum or carbon, there's no reason not to take advantage of this because it's easy to do. When you're building that arrow, you can take advantage of these benefits that you do gain from this. So that's the reason that we want to strive for it. Again, wood, understand, not a big deal. Now, you can get it with wood. You can go to cane arrows, lighter shafting material, double tapered. You can do a lot of things to help reduce that weight of that shaft to help get you into these upper EFOCs, especially with some of the heads out there. There's options, but it's not, again, none of this is mandatory. I mean, you could go to the store and buy whatever shaft, even you know, well, I don't want to use the example of carbons because I think for traditional bows, standard carbons are too light unless you do some heavier head stuff on them. But you could go with wood, for example. You could buy a 23/64 diameter cedar shaft and a solid non-tapered cedar shaft. Taper both of the ends, put a knock on one end, put a 125 grain broadhead on the other end, and go kill anything in North America all day long. It works perfectly. We've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's been being done that way in stone points, all that stuff. I mean, it's been going on for a long time. But I've killed a lot of animals with a wood arrow and a standard 125 grain head. You know, I don't even remember what FOC that would end up in, but it's probably somewhere in that normal range, and that's okay. Just clarifying that right off the bat. But if you're shooting carbon or aluminum and you want to take this to that upper end, normal FOC 0 to 12%, that's pretty good. Okay, that's normal, what we consider. High FOC 12 to 19%, that's going to be better. When you get into extreme FOC 19 to 30%, the whole game changes. Everything just changes tremendously. Ultra extreme FOC is 30% or more, and that's just awesome. Keep in mind, I think as far as normal or acceptable hunting arrows that we would use, I think I want to say about 40% is the max anybody's ever been able to achieve with the technology and componentry we have today. But if you can get, I mean, any of this stuff is good. You know, ultra extreme FOC, that's probably a trickier one to hit to for a lot of people, but it is doable. But the higher you go on this level, the more advantages you're getting out of it. I don't know if there's a cutoff point where it's bad, but we're going to break it down for you and talk about some of that stuff. But when you go to that toughhead.com for education for the calculator, that'll tell you where you stand. In order to increase your FOC, what you need to do is you need to lighten the shaft or go with as light a shaft as you possibly can. Don't put a lot of crap on the back, you know, as far as, heavy knocks or, tons of cap wraps or long, anything you put weight on the back is going to offset that. So keep it as light as possible on the back. Something like this, maybe just standard, fletching on the back. Where am I at? So you can see that against me right there, just standard fletching. It's one of my son's compound arrows, which is, yes, built with high FOC for him out of a compound. But just keep in mind, you want to keep it as light as possible. Keep the shaft as light as you can and go as heavy as you can on the head. That's the whole process. My particular arrows here that I'm using, these are pushing almost 31% FOC or whatever ultra extreme FOC. They're almost 31%. And how I had to do to achieve that is I actually have a 150 grain head mounted on a 100 grain steel adapter inside of that. mounted to a 100 grain brass insert, mounted to another 100 grain brass insert that is actually, that one goes about that far. It's about this far into here. There's another 100 grain brass insert that's right on top of that. So my insert length in there is about that long. It's almost 3 inches long inside that shaft. So mine's pretty unique setup, but all that gives me 450 grains up front on this arrow. So I'm getting that just under 31% Ultra EFOC. The flight capabilities of this arrow is tremendous. I've never seen anything like it. I've been using this arrow. This is my fourth, I want to say third, fourth year that I have been shooting these. Yeah, I think it's the fourth year, and it has been incredible. Every year since wood, I have went higher FOC as I go. You know, I don't remember what they were. I think one of my first aluminum ones were pushing like 18%. Then I went to like 23%. Then I went to like 27%. Then I went to 31%, which is, or just under 30, you know, just over 30%, which is where I'm at with this one. Love this setup. Now, why does FOC matter? What does it do for you? What do you gain from it? In order to understand the advantages, we need to first take a look at what happens here with the weight leads. Okay, weight always leads. In momentum, weight is going to take over and lead. If you were to shoot this arrow backwards, if you put a kind of mounted a knock on here, and you shot this arrow backwards, it would flip around almost immediately. Why? Because the weight has to lead. The front end, the weight has to take over and go somewhere. If you take this arrow and you take it, hold it by the hand like this, and you throw it, hoping it's going to go straight, it will, when you throw it, it will turn and flip over because the weight leads. You can throw it up in the air this way, like straight up featherwise, and just launch it straight, you know, or actually put it up this way, throw it, it will turn. When it comes down, weight will bring it down. Weight leads. All right, so that one is so valuable that you understand that the weight has to leave. Imagine taking a broomstick, just an empty broomstick with nothing on it. And if you take that stick and you try to throw it like a spear, it's going to fly sideways. It's not going to go straight to you. You're going to throw it. It's going to just do this or that. It's just going to do whatever it wants to. It may even fly completely sideways. There's nothing to lead it. Now, if you take that same broomstick and you were to put a weight on the end of it, whether, you know, whatever it is, if you were to put tie a rock on the end of it or something like that, what's going to happen is when you throw that, now that weight will lead, and now that shaft will fly straight and go true because the weight on the front of it leads. The more weight you have up front, the better the lead is, the less the back of it matters. So that becomes a tremendous advantage. So, I mean, my arrow, in all reality, for the most part, basically is like taking a rock with a string on it, and I'm throwing that rock, which is the head part of this, and the string is the rest of the shaft. It's just floating. It's just along for the ride. This is my whole entire arrow. All this does anymore for me is allow me to be able to bring it back on a string. But once I shoot this, none of this, nothing back here matters on this arrow. This is all irrelevant. This is the part of my arrow that does all the work for me. And so when you start looking at it that way and understanding the concept, there's a lot of advantages to it. All arrows that we're going to have here you're shooting today are going to have some kind of weight up front, whether it's 100 grain on a compound, 125 grain head on a wood arrow, 150 on a wood arrow, whatever it is, you're going to have that weight which is going to make that work. Okay, imagine if you were to take a dart, even with feathers on it, and you take the head right off the dart, so it's just a plastic body with the feathers, and you throw that, it doesn't fly like a dart anymore because there's no weight to lead it. Weight leads. I cannot emphasize that enough, and it matters. Now, the advantages of having that weight up front, again, it just gets better as you go higher, but the concept is the same with all of these, but the higher up you go, the more advantages you're going to get. Now, when it comes to penetration, this is the one that everybody talks about. It's penetration. Penetration from FOC. Penetration is the thing I care about the least. Again, as I said, a standard wood grain or wood shaft with a 125 grain head will blow through everything we want to blow through today. I'm not worried about penetration. And If you go thinking, oh, well, if I got this arrow set up with all this FOC and all that stuff, I'll be able to blow through shoulder blades. You know what? I've blown through shoulder blades on bucks before, but on the same note, I've had it where a button buck or a yearling doe, I won't get through their shoulder blade. Why? Because if you hit them, their lighter weight, their momentum will roll and absorb the energy. That point being, there is no guarantees on any of that stuff. All right, as far as penetration goes. If you hit a rib in the middle of the body and you catch it on the right angle, that rib might have enough give to it that you may not penetrate through it the right way. Not on whitetails, but on bigger animals, things like that. Where if you hit that rib higher up, that rib is more rigid and stronger and you might punch through it rather than pushing it, kind of thing like that, where it's going to just flex in as it hits and absorb some of that energy. There's so many variables in penetration that I just, that advantage is there, and it's the one most people focus on. It's the one I focused on when I first got into this. It is now the one that I care the least about. It is not as important as the other benefits. Now, the benefits that matter to me is the flight and tuning characteristics of these arrows. This one is huge. As an example, some of the things you will notice as you go higher up this chart, wind resistance is incredible. If you take a arrow that has less FOC, so you got more evenly distributed weight across that shaft, not quite so much up front, as the wind hits that arrow, as that arrow flies and comes out of your bow, and then it gets hit with a crosswind, that arrow shaft kind of does this, and it starts to veer off because the weight is more in the middle of the shaft. It's not way up here. It's back here more. So what happens is it has a tendency to push that arrow off course with the wind coming in across there. As you move that weight more centered up towards the front, the back of this arrow may bounce around a little bit. So if I'm shooting that at you and it comes right to you, as that wind hits that arrow from this side going this way, that tail might do this a little bit, but weight leads. Because of that weight and all that weight up front, as that arrow is coming to you and that's kicking, we're going to go this way now because this is weird walking around. But so if that arrow is going this way, that head is still flying true. Regardless of what the back of the shaft does, that head is pulling it on the same direction. Just like a rock with a string. If you take that rock with a string and you throw it, it doesn't matter what the wind does to the string. The rock is still going exactly where you put it. The string has no influence on the flight characteristics of that rock. But now if you take an arrow, for example, and you have that, you don't have all that weight up front, so now it's a lighter weight rock, the shaft has more influence and can be blown off course more as a whole, rather than just kind of kick a little bit and that head's still leading. So wind resistance on there is a huge one. That's a big factor. Another one is deflection resistance. When I say deflection, I don't mean you can go shooting off of branches and skipping off of things and doing that. I'm talking about little minor deflections that cause us issues. For example, sometimes if you're hunting in the swamp and you got deer coming through grasses or light little twigs or anything like that, and I say very minor, it's not like I'm recommending you shoot through something, but I'm amazed how well that these recover from any kind of deflections like that. It can hit something, it can kick that shaft a little bit, and that head still wants to go where it wants to, because again, it's weight leading. It is a rock with a string on the back. So like I said, the back of this doesn't matter anymore. Once you get up there, the higher you go on the FOC, the less this matters back here. That front end, again, that's all my arrow. This is the only part of my arrow that matters. From the back of the insert, which is about right there to there, and that's what's doing all that work. The rest of it is just along for the ride. So you get less deflections, on little things. You can hit things that you don't normally think you could, and not that you're doing it intentionally, but you'd be amazed how many times I've taken shots and you end up, oh my God, and you hit a twig and you see that arrow kind of do this and it jumps a little. You'll shoot it, it'll go like that, and it still hits where I want it to, because that weight is pulling it forward. It's driving. This is the driving part of it, and it takes this wherever it's going to go. But if something bumps that, doesn't matter. That head is still flying forward and going to recorrect itself and take it where it wants to. So that's a major advantage to it. Now, another great point too we're going to get into is going to be broadhead flight. Now, with better broadhead flight, the advantages are almost again like that rock with the string on it. The further back your balance point is on that shaft, what's going to happen is the more the shaft and the fletching and everything have to be part of that equation, because your arrow goes from being my arrow, which is that part there, to being more of the whole arrow if you have a lower FOC. So what happens is when you shoot that with a broadhead, all broadheads want a plane. Okay, you got a blade on there. It's a sail. It wants to do what it wants to do through the wind. It's impacted more heavily by the wind. And if you have a further back center of FOC on there, what happens is the whole shaft becomes part of that. So when you shoot a broadhead, and that arrow, that broadhead gets impacted by that wind and hits there, the back of the shaft, because it's all this, you have more arrow as part of the equation, that shaft is going to turn too. When it turns, so as you shoot that, that broadhead wants to wind over there. Well, that shaft is going to compensate for that, and it's going to be included in it, and it's going to take your whole arrow from here and take it over to there. Or it's going to take it from here, if the wind's blowing that way, and take it over to there. Because the shaft and the feathers and the fletching are more influenced by it. Now, when you start adding more forward to center weight, you start having more weight up front, you get that rock and string effect. So what happens then is when you shoot it, that wind tries to impact it, but it really can't, because it's only up front here. And what happens is that shaft back here becomes irrelevant. It doesn't matter, because of it can do whatever it wants back here, because the weight isn't back here where it's all impacted in the shaft. It's only in the front, and since weight leads, the wind can't overpower that head, and that head still goes where it wants to. Regardless of what the back of the shaft does, the head is still going straight. The wind can't knock it off as easily. And you would be amazed. I'll actually link a video at the end of this. I did a video a couple of years ago where I took this, and the same exact arrows that I'm using, bare shaft, nothing on them, and I put a 1.5 inch wide Magnus number 2, which are the broadheads I shoot. I'll show you one. Let me grab one. I got one right. Sorry for that, but I had it over there. But this is the head right here that I use. That 1.5 inch wide Magnus broadhead on there, and I took that arrow as a bare shaft setup on here with no feathers on it, and I shot that arrow into a block target in my yard in the wintertime. 20 yards. I did 3 or 4. I don't remember. I'll put it in there for you. But I did 3 or 4 shots with that broadhead and a bare shaft on here. Now, anytime you would do that with a I don't recommend you try that, not even a little bit. Like I said, if you're not shooting in these categories here, especially getting up into that ultra, if you're in any of these other ones, what normally happens is that wind will, if you have no fletching on the back of that shaft, that wind will take off that broadhead, and that broadhead is going to fly and go, and it's going to do something weird, go down, go up, go left, go right. You have no idea what that broadhead is going to do. But because of the 30, almost 31% I'm getting out of these arrows in the FOC category, that weight forward, and the fact that, again, I said that is my whole arrow, is that front little part. When I shoot that, it flies and it hits that kill spot every single time. It flies a little knock high. That's my fault for my shooting style that I do, and I still shoot a little knock high. But point out with a bare shaft. But I mean, they're spined perfectly, they work great, but you'll see in that video that it's pretty impressive that happens. I'll also link a video. I did another one a few years ago with these same arrows, shooting them in ultra high winds, and you'll watch that thing fly, and you'll watch the back of that arrow dance around like this in the wind, but that head still hits exactly where I want to. Where when I would do that with something that was in the 18% range, that arrow would just blow off course. It would just kind of fly right out of the way and get off course with the wind. Where with that high FOC front on there, all that, again, weight leads, taking over. That shaft can do whatever it wants to back here, but that head still goes straight just like you want it to. So you get much better broadhead flight. Much better broadhead flight, meaning that they're going to hit where your field points are hitting at. You're going to not be so impacted by wind. You're not going to be so impacted by rain and soaked down, matted down feathers. You're going to have a lot better resistance to all of that kind of stuff. The things that we have to deal with in the field are going to be handled much better by an arrow the higher FOC that you go. It's just plain simple. It is what it is. I don't know how to explain it any better, but there's major advantages. And that's the same reason less fletching is needed. Actually, they say, and if you read that Ed Ashby reports and stuff that he's gotten, his tuning advice on there, he recommends going as small as you can on the fletching. He's got something, you'll have to watch it, I haven't seen it in a while, but he has a whole system of ultra high FOC. including what side fletching you should run, things like that. And they're very little, but the purpose is that you don't need them because, again, that's the whole part of the arrow now. When you get up there, the higher FOC you go, the front's all that matters. So when you shoot it, the wind is going to impact this because there's nothing back here. There's no weight back here. It's the string behind a rock, and that wind can blow that lightweight string anywhere it wants to. Doesn't matter though, because the front is still taking it where you want it to be because the weight leads. But you can go with much smaller fletching if you want to. I used to shoot, when I was shooting wood arrows, and even my aluminums, and even my first set of carbons that were the ones that were into the 23%, I was shooting a 5.5 inch high back feather. And then once I started going to these, and especially when I started bare shafting them and seeing how good they flew, I went shorter. I did all kinds of things. I was down to a 2-inch feather on there, and it worked good, but I make my own. These are a 4-inch, and I make them a high back, and I kind of break Ashby's rules on here, but I want to see that ball of fletching flying. I want to see that when it spins, I want to see that big ball of, you can see it real good on the black here, but I want to see that big ball of feather spinning rather than just these little bitty, teeny, matted down, half-size kind of feathers. So I prefer the feathers that I'm using, but you don't need them. You can get away with much smaller fletching on a high FOC, or the higher up the chart you go, the less fletching that matters back here. Again, main reason being because that becomes your whole arrow. If I could find a way to shoot just that part out of my longbow, I don't even need the rest of this. It's irrelevant. All this does is just kind of stabilize a little bit for that as it goes straight. But the weight is what takes it down there. And then faster recovery as well too. When you have weight further distributed down the shaft, when you shoot it, you have this thing called Archer's Paradox. Okay, so you shoot it, and it's gonna, as I take this bow and I shoot it, what's gonna happen as soon as I release, this arrow is gonna flex like this. It's gonna bend, so you can see it as it goes around my bow. As it clears my bow, it's gonna flex the other way, flex the other way, flex the other way, and it's gonna just keep coming forward as it does it. That's the whole process. That Archer's Paradox, flexing, flexing, flexing like that. If the weight is back here more, then the shaft becomes more of the equation of the arrow. So you're going to have a lot more back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth as it goes down there with a lower FOC. Again, it's okay. Like I said, wood guys have been using them all the time. They work fantastic. And wood arrows recover very quickly. They're incredible. But now when you move that weight forward, because weight leads, the back of this is just it's gonna be a lot less because you have less impact from back here. So it may bend around the bow, and that's done. It's done. There's nothing else back here weight-wise for it to flex. All the weight is in the front, which is dragging the shaft forward. So that's a major advantage for the faster recovery. Penetration-wise, again, like I said, not the most important thing to me, but the benefits to it for penetration. The reason it penetrates better is because of the fact that the weight is forward. When you have weight forward, all of the energy is transferred immediately into that bone or whatever you're hitting. It smacks, crack, and it pushes itself through. Now, if the weight is further back on the shaft, what happens is when you hit bone or whatever you're hitting, the shaft has to flex to try to push that into there. You can see it kind of flex and bend as that goes. It's going to bend when it hits because you got weight back here driving forward, which causes that shaft to bend. When that happens, you lose energy. Energy is absorbed in the actual flexing of the shaft, trying to get all the weight that's somewhere back here into that forward part. And because you have that weight, it's going to flex. When that shaft flexes, it cannot fit through there as well as you want to. And it's like trying to take a knife and stab it in and then bending it as you're going. It's not the same where you go straight through. And that's the concept of it. And also, when it hits, even though as your weight is further back, when it hits, it does the same thing almost like Archer's Paradox. When we shoot that bow or that arrow comes out of there and we shoot that, you get that bend around, bend back, bend, that shaft is bending. Well, the same thing happens when it impacts bone. When it hits, you still have energy throughout the shaft that is going to boom, and again, it's going to bend it like that when it hits. But the more weight that's back here, the more of this that you get happening. Imagine a hole that's the diameter of that shaft or the furlew on that broadhead. right here, that's the size of your hole, is the size of that small little furlue, and then you got that blade in there. That blade hits, and this shaft is bending like this, up and down, as it impacts that target. How well do you think that head can fit through there trying to fight through it like this rather than going straight through it? When you move the weight more forward on that shaft, the less of this matters back here, the less weight, so there's less of this happening. What happens when that hits is it goes boom, and it pushes right through, and this shaft, because of less weight, is not flexing as much, and it can just follow very simply through that hole. Where when you have one that, if you're, like I said, if your FOC is back further, the influence from the shaft, that may get through there, but then because this shaft is still flexing like this as it hits, it's trying to fight its way through that hole, up and down like that, and it causes less penetration. And it happens very fast, but you can see this stuff has been proven on high-speed cameras, all this kind of stuff, but it makes a tremendous difference for you as far as penetration. But that's why, again, weight forward. That is my whole arrow, is that 3 inches of insert plus all my stuff. That's all that matters. The rest of it is just along for the ride. So that's the advantages of high FOC, ultra high FOC, extreme FOC, whatever, any way you want to cut it. The more you get that balance point forward on that shaft, the better off you're going to be. That's my opinion. And if you're shooting carbon or you're shooting aluminum, it's worth taking the time. Not right now. Don't take your arrows that you've been shooting that are fantastic and go trying to modify them all. Hunting season's right around the corner. Use what you're using for this year. It works, it's good, and it's okay. If it's in normal or high, doesn't matter. When you're ready to build another arrow or get new arrows, that's the time to tinker with it. Figure out what's going to work. You're probably going to have to go to a stiffer spine shaft than what you are. I know, because I use 35, 55 shafts. Somebody is going to jump on here and go, "You're too soft of a spine. That's way under spine, blah, blah, blah." I get it on some of my other ones. They don't understand the fact that I'm using a 3-inch insert in here on a 27-inch arrow, which is giving me like a 24-inch flexible shaft. That's my whole shaft right there that flexes. They don't understand all that stuff. So when you get into extreme and ultra extreme FOC, there isn't really many arrow charts out there. There are some and some calculators, and I've looked at them, but I still think your best bet is to experiment. But you'll have to you'll probably have to go to a stiffer spine shaft, heavier heads. You'll have to do some modifications. Again, lightweight shaft, heaviest head you can. That's how you start climbing up that FOC scale and gaining that percentage of forward of center weight, which is really what you're after. So a lot of advantages to it, a lot of great things, but again, not mandatory. And if you're a wood shooter, don't think it's the end of the world if you can't get it. Again, people have been killing animals with a cedar shaft with a 125 grain head on it, and somewhere in that normal FOC range, and they've been doing it for decades and decades and decades with great success on all kinds of animals. It doesn't matter. But if you're shooting carbon or aluminum, why not take advantage of this stuff? Why not gain the benefits of it? So that's my thought process on it. I'm a huge proponent of FOC. I've been shooting them for years. Like I said, if you take into account my stuff that was in the standard, in the 20% range, 23% range, 27% range, we're probably going back almost 15 years, 12 years of me shooting these, something that's extreme or ultra extreme. And let me put it this way. Every time I climb up, I always go, "Man, that's awesome." I never think about going back. I will never go back to a 28%, 27, 19. I'll never go backwards. From here, if I go anywhere, it'll be 31, 32%, something like that if I can pull it off. But I've never found myself wanting to go to less FOC. Do I need to have it ultra extreme or even extreme? No, I don't. But there's benefits, like we said, that make it worth doing. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I will put at the end of this video here, there will be a couple videos that you can click on. It'll show you the broadhead bare shaft with this. And again, don't try that at home. If you do that, that broadhead can go anywhere. You never know where it's going to go. So don't try that. And then I'll show you the one where I do it with with these arrows in extreme winds as well too. So you'll see some examples for you. They'll be there, and there's also going to be a little icon of me there. Click on that. That'll take you to, it'll subscribe you to the channel and you get more of this info. So thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.